that I want to thank this board for hiring me for this position. You know, I'm from this community. Now that I have been here 6 months, I think, you know, standing at the senior scholarship program that evening and hearing the alma mater again after all these years, and know there's a sense of pride that I have just as a graduate of this school system and somebody who's born and raised in this school system or in this community. And I want to be successful here, and I want this school system to be successful. And you know, listening to what our county commission chairperson said earlier, I wanted this whole community to be successful. And I think all of you want the same thing. And you know, after communicating with a lot of other new superintendents or those not so new, you know, I'm appreciative of our situation here. And while we have issues and problems like any school system has, we have a lot of good things here, and we have a lot of opportunities for growth and improvement. With that being said, one of the things that has come to my attention that I think is going to be critically important moving forward is making sure that we're all on the same page in terms of board and superintendent roles and responsibilities. So why is this an important topic? First of all, one thing that I have learned, and I heard very loudly and clearly over the last week or so, that this is an issue of not having clarity with this topic. This is an issue that is a very common problem in this state, in Alabama school systems. One of the things that I heard is that the average tenure of Alabama superintendents right now in Alabama is currently 3 years and 2 months. And if you think about the idea that a contract is typically 3 years, that's a scary proposition. That about half of those are going even less than that time. I have been on this job less than 6 months, and I was told this past Sunday afternoon that there are 32 superintendents in this state that are newer than me in this position, so I'm like a veteran now. I was also told that the research shows that the #1 reason superintendents don't make it in their position is this issues, school board and superintendent relationships. And kind of the idea that as the board goes and the superintendent in that relationship, so goes the school system. Bringing me to the second point is it was stressed, especially in one of the sessions, Ms. Gentry was in there as well, that it's important to have a plan for a long-term relationship of trust and respect with the board and the superintendent. And the reason that this is critically important is because you cannot establish and accomplish goals and objectives without that being in place. One of the reasons for that is just looking at the statistics. The relationship is starting over with new people on a regular basis, and that's problematic in trying to accomplish long-term goals with short-term people. The statement I thought that addressed this issue that I saw, and this is by the Alabama Association of, this is the Superintendents Administrators Association, and then the Alabama Association of School Boards. I thought this was an important statement, that it says a top priority for the board and the superintendent is to recognize just how important this relationship is and make it a priority. That the board cannot be effective without an effective superintendent, and the superintendent cannot be effective without a good working relationship with the board. And that we have to take time to discuss and agree on our roles. And if we don't do that, we run the risk of becoming a statistic. Moving on to the second piece, I attached a copy, and I know you all have these first two documents that I attached, but just for the sake of us discussing it tonight, there are two documents here. Both of these are documents that were created in association with AASA and AASB. So this is what the experts say that we should be, focusing on. I wanted to pull out a couple of pieces. If you can look on page 18 of the first one, this is actually technically the school board president's handbook, but on page 18, under section 3, where it says working with your board, I thought this was an important, there were some important comments made about halfway down that first paragraph on page 18. it says, each member of the board brings to the board a unique combination of experiences, knowledge, contacts, and commitments. And so it emphasizes here the collaborative and cooperative working relationship. I thought when I read that, and I read both of these booklets from cover to cover more than once, but I thought of the exercise we went through in our board retreat where we did the personality assessments and talked about how that works together as we work together as a team, and how important each person is, what we bring to the table. Every individual is critically important to the success of the team. On down in the next paragraph, it talks about these differences though that we have, while they bring a strength to the table, can make things difficult too. And that conflicts may arise, and at one point or another, a board member may want to step out, unknowingly or unaware out of their role, or the superintendent may venture over into policy making that's not his or her role. And when that happens, it has to be brought back into order. On page 21. At the very beginning of that section, away from the meeting, and this was stressed this weekend in one of the sessions, and Ms. Gentry and I sat in a session all day together on Friday that some of this was mentioned. But it was re-emphasized to me that the school board's authority is granted to the board, not to individuals. And I think what Mr. Kennemer just went over with the changes in the Open Meetings Act is really to strengthen, tighten that dynamic so that it truly is what's happening, is that those individual opinions, ideas come together collectively in a whole board meeting. But we all know that what we do outside of meetings impacts how effective we are inside the meeting, and it addresses that there. And then one other place on page 22, there's a section there that just talks about how conflict is a natural part of any group dynamic, really, and then gives some ideas about resolving and handling conflicts, and then talks about that change and conflict is not always bad. They kind of go hand in hand. That when changes are needed to accomplish goals, sometimes conflict has to come with that process, and managed correctly, it's just part of the process. And conflict can change situations and prevent the status quo from continuing when there's a need. So conflict in and of itself not being a bad thing, but how we manage it is what's important. So I just thought those were some things that I highlighted that made an impression on me as we think moving forward about our roles and responsibilities. In the shorter document, the second document, this is the one for all board members. And really it's just, I know you all have this, but really outlines in very clear detail what the school board's role is, what board members' roles are, and what my role as the superintendent or the superintendent's role is. And some of the things that, jumped out at me is just a reminder that, the board is their primary role is to the establishment of policies. The superintendent's responsibilities for the administrative functions, the day-to-day operations, and there has to be support both ways for those roles. On down the list, there are some responsibilities that I have so that you all can have the information that you need to make decisions. That I need to make sure I provide all of the information to you that you need and answer questions and so forth. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. One of the things I starred is the third from the bottom on that first little page there, to channel communications that require action through the superintendent and to refer all concerns, complaints, and other communication to the superintendent. And I think, my reflection is that this is harder in a small town environment than it is sometimes when the environment is bigger, and a challenge I think that all small city school systems face as board members and superintendents. Under the superintendent's role, it's my responsibility to keep you all informed about operations and programs, recommendations that I make, and they're all, and talking with other superintendents, there are about 300 million different ways to do that. And the #1 problem that I'm hearing other new superintendents and even some not new superintendents struggle with is that balance, getting that right, and where the board and the superintendent, where there's a communication flow that the work can still get done, but the board members have the amount of communication they need, and it's in a format that's appealing or useful to all board members. In addition to this, and I didn't make a copy of this because the document is about that thick, but my responsibilities beyond just what's stated here involve the day-to-day operations, and the reason a board has to hire a superintendent in the first place is the responsibilities that are outlined in the administrative code, which is that thick, not to mention other local policies, not to mention state and federal laws. Those are the things that you could not possibly address. There's no way you would have access to the information you need to make sure we're in compliance and following proper protocol procedures in that way. And that's why you hired a superintendent to do that. And so hopefully what my goal is to make sure you all can trust me moving forward so that you feel confident that I am making good decisions and keeping us in compliance and moving the system forward to meet our goals and objectives. That's my challenge for myself. The reason, in section 3 here, in my mind, there was a sense of urgency in talking about this a little bit among our group. There have been several things that I think, knowing the statistics on how problematic this can be for school systems, there were several things that are on my mind, causing me to lie awake at night and lose some sleep over some things. One is that we had some attention from the State Department. I know back in the fall before I arrived, there was a visit. There are ongoing communications with me as a new superintendent. I know over the last week I've had 3 high-ranking State Department officials ask me questions, and one reminded me that they monitor local media and they stay aware when red flags arise. And that was a concern to me, because while I want our school system to have the attention of the State Department for hopefully innovative, wonderful things we're doing here, I don't want to be on their radar for a reason like that. And that was a concern to me. Secondly, as we've already discussed, the Advanced Ed External Review Report, they gave us basically a citation in the area of leadership capacity, and it was in this very area, establishing clear roles and responsibilities for the governing body and the district level administration team to ensure efficacy of meeting the needs of learners and accomplishing the goals of the district. And so there it is again, the importance of that relationship, the board and the superintendent, those roles and responsibilities in meeting the needs of the district. So we've got the state and the outside accrediting agency looking at a concern. And then there's been discussion even at this board table, among yourselves about this. And that, of course, has been picked up by the local media. And again, now I'm realizing it's being monitored beyond our boundaries here. And so that is a concern. So local, state, and beyond attention to this issue. We've discussed some just internally how important it is to have a relationship of trust and respect between board members and not just the superintendent but other school system administrators. And I view it's my job over time. I hope you will hold me accountable for making sure we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing to meet goals and do them in a professional, productive way. Knowing that if trust is violated in those areas on either side of the table, that it is impossible or difficult or very time-consuming to repair those relationships. What we hope is that, knowing this is an issue that we've got to work on moving forward, I hope that we can find a way to give some benefit of the doubt on both sides of this moving forward, so that we can begin to reestablish trust in those relationships. And then the final reason that this is on my radar as a concern is because we have a number of critical issues that we have to address in the school system. I've listed a few here, but these are all things that are very complex issues. Taking any one in and of itself is very time-consuming, very complicated, and is going to require all of us to be on the same page about how we want to move forward. And so our relationship is critically important if we want to advance in these areas. The next to the last little area here, and I know Dr. McCreary was there for part of the conference, and Ms. Gentry was there for the entire pre-conference, and then I was with her on that Friday. But a lot of this she and I both heard, and so you can correct me if you think I misheard any of this, but there were some things that I have as takeaways just from the last week from the AASB and the SSA conferences, kind of in the way of suggestions or notes or comments with regard to this topic. So the first has to do, there with logistics for board meetings. It was suggested in the session that she and I both sat in, it was stressed that it's very important that our work sessions and our board meetings are orderly, professional, and what they call, quote, tightly run, keeping conversations focused on the issues at hand. And we had some conversation about this at a last work session, so I feel like we're, addressing that. And then the other thing I mentioned a little earlier, that, it's my job to get information to you, and I want feedback. I'm learning. I'm 5.5 months into this. Although I now realize I am a veteran, I am still learning. But so that you bring questions to me before the board meetings, and that I would respond to those in a prompt way. And I want to know when I'm not doing that effectively or to the satisfaction of any one of you individually. And make adjustments as I need to. The communication piece, Dr. Terry Jenkins is a retired superintendent of the year both in Georgia and Alabama. I think he was a superintendent for about 34 years, and I knew him, I got to know him a little bit when he was in Auburn City Schools when I was in Alexander City. But he spoke at the AASB conference, and he made these suggestions. He was talking primarily to board members. There were a few superintendents in the room, but he suggested that what needs to be on our minds is to stay focused on the students, not adult issues. And Dr. Bice, I learned this from him a long time ago. I may have told some of you at the very first board meeting when he became a superintendent, he sat a small chair beside the board table, and he said, and he still has that chair in meetings to this day, but he said that was to remind all of them, himself included, that every single word that's said, decision that's made, impacts a student in that chair. And it's easy to get off on adult issues that don't really have anything to do with kids. And so I hope I am not ever guilty of that, and for us to hold each other accountable for that. And just to remember that we're not always going to agree, and that I have to accept that I can't always, make decisions that every single person will be happy with. I'm going to try to do that as much as I can, but we will have times when we disagree, and that's okay as long as we're all still focused on the goals ahead. He did make a statement that really struck me, that if there is battling among board members and the superintendent in any shape, form, or fashion, and it is a common thing that you see, that he said, quote, good PR can't fix that. There's no amount of PR that can fix that. And that made an impression on me. It's, again, I said it's my job to give you information, and your job, we've talked about, when you have information ahead of time, to keep that confidential until it's time to vote or discuss it. I think the way the Open Meetings Act has been reframed, that it's even elevated the importance of that, for your protection, if for no other reason, as individual board members. And, Dr. Jenkins made two suggestions that I had to stop and think about. One of them, and he said, Ms. Gentry may remember, he made the statement, he said, now before I say this, a lot of superintendents disagree with me about this. He said, I'll give that disclaimer. But he made the statement that basically, to the extent possible, superintendents should recommend actions that the board will support. And so as long as everybody is in their proper roles, if I become aware that we're headed down a path and pursuing some goal or objective and a recommendation is involved and I don't have the support of the board, that as the superintendent I need to think about that. And he elaborated on that. And so that's caused me to stop and reflect on that and how I would have that information ahead of time and what that might look like if everyone is staying, if we're all in our proper roles. And another thing he said, and I have not necessarily been doing this, but he made a very strong statement about this. He was adamant, in fact, probably the most adamant thing he said was that if a board member brings me as the superintendent a piece of information that the superintendent should share that with all of the board members. And when he first said that, I had to really process that, but I thought, that makes a lot of sense because I know I've been responding to individual information that you've been giving to me, so I'll have maybe a lengthy conversation with an individual about an item, but the rest of you may or may not be privy to that, and I kind of lose track of, I think I've said this maybe, I don't remember if I've already told you this or not, and so if I make a habit of, if one of you brings me a particular piece of information, that is information that the whole board should have if it's related to an item that will come before the board. So I've got to think through, I've not been doing that, and that was a very strong recommendation that he made. Number 2 there, I think this is a big one, and by all accounts, this is a problem that especially small school systems face in small towns. But I think it's the kind of thing, and he said, this will, I think at one point he said, quote, this will burn you. And this is something that I think we have to work at. This is something that can be a bad habit, and habits are hard to break, but with regard to communications with employees and community members, to refer the complainants to follow the chain of command. So it's on me to kind of train employees and parents even to try to let's follow proper processes. But really the only way that will ever be effective is if on the other end, so if we have a lot of people, let's say parents or teachers or whoever, and the first thing they do when they have a concern or a complaint is go straight to a board member, that it's going to cause problems for a variety of reasons. And so that chain of command. The second thing that was discussed and recommended was, to abstain from individual counsel and action. And I think actually this is where the statement was made that this can get you burned as an individual board member, that you would not be privy to all of the details, laws, regulations, items of concern with a particular matter. And if you comment on those things, it can put the whole board in jeopardy, really, because you would be speaking on behalf of the board, could be, with regard to an item that is going to be acted on later. So just that was a word of caution to us. And then we've already covered kind of with the Open Meetings Act, abstaining from individual comments about employees or potential employees because they come before the whole board. And so we've kind of already talked about that with the Open Meetings Act. And then refrain from giving staff directions. Those were the 4 items as suggestions there. This month in School Administrator, ironically, there's an article, and I read the article. It's just a 1-page little article, and it highlights some specific things about the conversations, one-on-one conversations between board members and school personnel. And kind of the question is, should board members have that teacher contact? And at one point in the article he says the answer is firmly yes and no, and he details in this article when it's yes and when it's no, and I think it's probably the most concise and clearly laid out explanation of this that I have seen, and I thought I would share it with you. The 2 paragraphs probably I put a star by, or the one right above where it says 2-way protection, and the first part of the paragraph right below that I thought were pretty important. So I wanted to share that with you. But Since our last board meeting, I've had 2 board members ask me about kind of who should speak to the media. And this was actually addressed in one of the sessions that we attended, and I had not really thought about it in these terms, but the suggestion, I think the attorney for AASB was doing the session and stated basically that if there, the media contacts the superintendent's office from time to time, and if those questions are, most of the time they'll be related to day-to-day operations of the school system. And so typically the superintendent is the spokesperson, and right now some have a designee, but right now that is me in the school system. However, sometimes the media contacts board members, and I think that has happened. And so one of the things I thought you guys might want to talk about, because I don't think this is my question to answer, but at least 2 of you have asked me, about this. They recommended that is a decision that the board should make. Who is the spokesperson for the board's decisions, for decisions of the board? Their suggestion was that it should be the school board president. That was their recommendation. However, they said, it can be virtually whatever you decide it to be, but that it needs to be decided. They cautioned against a situation where all of the board members speak on behalf of the board to the media, but acknowledge that that is what some boards do. But I'm bringing it up because the question has come to me recently, and I thought that's something y'all may want to discuss and decide what it is you want the procedure to be. But I tried, my thoughts have been all over the place on this topic, but I think at the end of the day, in my heart, I know that for me to be successful and us to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish in the school system, we have to get this right. And I feel a tremendous amount of pressure to lead us in that direction. And I think on a very, very positive note, I think that we all want the same thing. I think that what I want to accomplish for the school system is the same thing that all of us want to accomplish. So that's a pretty good starting point. And I don't think that's true everywhere. So I don't want to become a statistic either. And I don't think we want our school system to become a statistic or part of this statistic. And we're going to be working on establishing some concrete goals so that we can measure those and give the board better information about how we're progressing. But this is important to me. I want to do the right thing. Y'all are having to be patient with me as I learn, in this process. I want to hear your feedback as I, make changes moving forward. And really any reflections or discussion you have on this topic about how we need to move forward with this. So I appreciate you giving me a few minutes. I'll try to be as concise as I could, but this is a big topic, so.
All right.